Hi guys. Raise your hand, please, if you are a bootcamp graduate. Sweet. OK, this talk is not for you. All right. And raise your hand. I assume most of the rest of you are classically trained. Whatever. I'm assuming that. OK, cool. I'm Esther. I graduated bootcamp, Dev Bootcamp, 3 months ago in New York, actually, not here. And this is kind of about, one, what we kind of learned in bootcamp, and two, what it's been like to break into tech after that. So especially for those people who have finished bootcamp and have been working in the tech scene for a while, your mileage may be different than mine. So here's perspective from New York. OK, so Dev Bootcamp, pretty nifty place. We have a bunch of campuses. There's one in New York, San Francisco. There's one in Chicago, DC. I think they're opening some other ones, maybe one in Seattle. I'm not sure. It's actually one of the first boot camps. Actually, I think it was the first boot camp. It opened its doors in February 2012. And the structure is it's 19 weeks, and 9 weeks it's remote off campus. So you're learning online. You're connected to other boot campers in your cohort. And then the next 9 weeks, you spend on campus. People tend to spend between 60 and 80 hours in the classroom. And then at the very end, you graduate, and there's a career week, which is basically like they give us support on like how to send out applications or building a tech resume and things like that. And the reason that I'm talking about it here is because Dev Bootcamp, like many other bootcamps, is Rails-based. So they teach full stack development. OK, cool. So part-time remote, the first 9 weeks. We essentially get a short introduction into a whole bunch of different things. So working on the command line, using Git and GitHub, like making small pages with HTML, styling with CSS. Then there's intro to Ruby and algorithms, and generally what it means to think in a programming way. Then there's JavaScript, and we spent some time with basic SQL. And this is all in the first 9 weeks. So this is all remote. So you're working in pairs, even though you're remote, a couple times a week. There's code reviews. There's meetings with mentors. It's kind of inclusive. There's a Slack channel. You have a ton of work that you need to complete. But they say, oh, it'll only take you like 15 hours, 20 hours a week. Personally, I was putting in at least 40 hours a week. And had been doing that before, too. Wanted to be as prepared as possible. And they stress things like the kind of culture that Dev Bootcamp has. Like, it's inclusive. There's a concept called engineering empathy, et cetera. OK, and feedback. OK, so phase one, there's for the first week, we do algorithm data structures. At this point, you spend a lot of time on campus. It's not cool to go home before 8 o'clock. At least, et cetera. Week 2, classes and modules. Week 3, databases, active record. Next week, jump into phase 2. You start learning about the web and sort of CRUD basics. You start building apps in Sinatra. Then you start building more JavaScript-y things on week 5, kind of standalones, and then working more on front-end things like jQuery, understanding Ajax, all those sorts of things. Week 6, we're putting it all together, building more full-stack projects. Pretty cool. Then you graduate onto phase 3, where there's intro to Rails and our spec. Remember writing some Capybara text, too. Week 8, in my campus, we had React that week. Not every campus had that. More JavaScript-y things. And then you jump into the final project. So you pitch and build like a pretty cool app, Rails app, and then you present them, and you go off. My team, we built a pretty cool app. So why do people choose boot camps? There's a couple of reasons. I've isolated 4 reasons. The first one is it's faster than spending 3 or 4 years of your life doing a CS degree. This is really important for people who, like me, didn't decide to do web development as soon as they graduated high school. I have 2 English degrees. And everyone that I knew through bootcamp and other places came from a non-technical background. You can ignore the 3 years of calc that I did. It's cheaper, way cheaper than going to the traditional route again. of course, and not just in terms of money, but also time. It's practical. So what does that mean? We've had people, at least in my campus, actually in other campuses too, I hear, who had finished computer science degrees and entered a boot camp in order to gain practical skills. They knew how computers worked, but not necessarily how to build an app. Whereas all that we did was build stuff. And I think this is the most important one, is that at Dev Bootcamp and at other kinds of boot camps, you learned in an accepting environment. A lot of us were not traditional people in the industry. More than half of my cohort were women. There were other minorities, and generally there was this push to be inclusive and to be kind to each other and to not make assumptions. And this was not the kind of thing. So when I was in college, I looked around me and I looked at the kind of people that went into different majors. And I saw people who were walking into computer science, and I'm like, I'm not a dude. I didn't grow up in a garage hacking on computers. Is that what people did? OK, well, I wasn't one of those people. I didn't believe this was for me. A lot of people don't. And a lot of those people end up deciding, hey, maybe this is for me. But then how do they get into things? By bootcamp. OK, but then I graduated, and I'm like, OK, this is so great. I can build stuff. I can learn stuff. That's cool. I can open an app and kind of understand what's happening. But the response that I got as an applicant to positions, to junior or intern positions, or even other kinds of things, was pretty terrible. People said to me, hey, you're cool. You built some cool stuff. What's your background? Oh, bootcamp? Never mind. And I think I know more or less that in Chicago that's slightly less the case. It's somewhat more accepting here. But in New York, it's definitely the case. And I hear that it's the same way on the other coast. People say, hey, you only got interested in this because it's glamorous and fashionable to be in tech right now. I don't know if that's really the thing. It definitely wasn't for us, for my cohort. It wasn't like, there's that whole, someone made this great point about how there's this like nerds are cool culture happening, and like models wearing glasses, I think, came out of that table. And that's not why people are in this thing at all. There's this idea that you can throw money at a bootcamp, and then you come out and you can call yourself a full-stack web developer, as if there is no basis for that, as if you haven't spent 100 hours every week learning something brand new that you have never learned before, as if you have nothing to prove it with. That kind of sucks to hear coming out, having done that. You're only in this for the paycheck. OK, well, you might as well say that about everyone who's in anything that makes any sort of money. Oh, you must have only gotten interested in this because, yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people too. That really sucks, considering that I go home at night and I'm like, ooh, I want to solve that other problem I was working on. Last night, some people helped me. I'm really grateful to those who have helped me today. Last night, I went, didn't go out and stayed in because there was this one gem that I'm trying to build, and I was like, I can't figure this out. OK, you don't do that because you want a paycheck. You do that because it's fun, because it's nice to get better at things, because you learn, because it's exciting. There's a lot of great reasons other than, hey, you're in this for the money. Bootcampers are much less prepared for professional development versus classically trained computer science graduates. I heard this despite the fact that I hear that computer science graduates aren't necessarily perfectly prepared to start to jump into web development and start producing great code. It sounds like all of us who are entering kind of need some support and help. It kind of sounds like all of us deserve to be given a chance to learn. OK, so TripleByte, really cool site. They are in it's a company in San Francisco, and they basically help get people into jobs based on aptitude testing. They did a really cool thing. They looked at boot camps versus college. They got a lot of applicants, and they didn't look at their backgrounds. They just had them do algorithms. And based on the strength of their applications, they would proceed them to certain jobs. In terms of practical programming, everyone, well, let's see, university graduates and bootcamp graduates, that's the yellow and the green, they were pretty much the same. In terms of algorithms and data structures, bootcampers really didn't really lost out. In terms of low-level system design, we really lost out. But in terms of web system design, we won out. So I think what's really interesting about the algorithm data structures bit is that TripleByte made a point about saying that actually the only group that did well on this were recent computer science graduates, not people who have been in the industry for a while, suggesting that over time you lose that skill since you're not using it as much as you thought you would. OK. So here's kind of what I think is happening here. Bootcampers, we learn really, really quickly. We learn in a very short time frame on top of a practical use case base. So we're like, OK, I have to build this one thing. I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything at all. But I have to build it. I have to go from 0, not just in front of me, but in my head, to having something there and hopefully something in my head. So no theory behind what we're doing. Our knowledge is based on what our needs have exposed us to. So I need to know something. I go and find that out. Afterwards, I know something about it. We're groomed to be practical web creators, especially by our boot camps. My understanding is that computer science graduates learn by building on top of a theoretical base. So I've met some really cool computer science graduates, especially at hackathons. They know tons of stuff, right? And yet building on top of it, it's easier, but we still have to learn. Both of us have to learn. They know a lot about operating systems. They know how things work in theory. They're groomed to be computer scientists, not necessarily practical web creators. But that's OK, because all of us love code. All of us love building things. All of us are going to succeed. What we don't have technically, we make up with passion, grit, and the willingness to go all in. That's a huge deal. You can't spend all this time working towards a goal without wanting it so much that everything else falls by the wayside. Everything. My family didn't hear from me. I'm not sure that most of my family have heard from me yet after boot camp. That's something that you're getting with the boot camper. Boot camps are awesome. OK, but we come out of it and we face a lot of difficulty. We come out of boot camp, and especially on the coast, we face discrimination because people believe that we don't know enough, we aren't good enough, we just don't stack up against computer science graduates or anyone else at all. And that sucks. This is not a fad for those of us who are seeking it. We're in this because for the most of us, there was no other way to get into the scene. And it would be really nice if you guys gave us a chance. And I really appreciate that you're giving me a chance. Thank you.